Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday evening to you. Welcome into Cover 4 Live. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have the entire Dog Nation team on hand here tonight as well. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, as we talk about everything going on around UGA, some of it fact-based, some of it rumor-based, and some of it, maybe a mixture of the two. We'll look forward to doing all of that. Before we're done, I'll ask these gentlemen just exactly what in the world is going on with Will Muschamp, allegedly in Athens, but apparently not, at least for now, working at UGA. We'll talk about that, the pursuit of a new defensive backs coach, the crazy turmoil at Tennessee, and a whole lot more fun in between all of that. But before any of that, though, Georgia obviously has out-recruited virtually every program in the country, certainly in the SEC East in recent years, and yet the championship hopes for the upcoming season, I would say, rest on the shoulders of some of those elite recruits, particularly maybe some of the five-star guys, really stepping up, taking their game to the next level. If they're able to do that, then Georgia's chances of really hoisting that trophy at the end of the season go way up. Jeff, since the five-star language is the language you speak on a daily basis as Dog Nation's recruiting insider, I'll ask you, of the former five stars on the Georgia roster, which one, and you can kind of take this how you want to go with it, is the most pivotal, has the most on his shoulders for this upcoming season, best chance to, really step up and thrive this year? In a topic like this, who's the five-star that comes to mind?
Well, there's really one, but I'm not going to name that one. I'm going to let that one let that one sit on the board for maybe somebody that's got a ceramic bulldog looking over his shoulder right now. For me, I think it's Nolan Smith. I think people are waiting to see Nolan. I'm waiting. I took Connor's answer. I'm going to take somebody's answer. Who should I say? Demetrius Robertson? I guess I should say Demetrius Robertson, and that was for variety's sake. No offense, D-Rob, but I think for me, the guy, I think you need somebody to replace the engine that was Azeez Ojulari for Georgia's pass rush. I think it helps Georgia's recruiting to see Nolan get about 12 sacks and just, matriculate himself onto the Sunday League. A lot of names to think about there. You got the obvious ones, but for me, I think they need to replace a big engine of their defense, and that is with perhaps, let's face it, folks, the highest rated recruit Georgia has ever signed under Kirby Smart, number one overall, number one in his position, number one in the state of Florida. That's Nolan Smith, and he needs to play like it this year, and I think he will.
And Connor, you want to talk about Nolan Smith, so I'll certainly give you the chance to do that. I've even talked about him myself on Dog Nation Daily as I would believe arguably Georgia's most important player this offseason because Dogs did get better with the pass rush a year ago. If you're going to do anything defensively in modern times, the 2021 season, being able to negate the explosive plays of opposing offenses with your own negative plays are, for the most part, just about a prerequisite there for that. And as Jeff said, guys like Azeez Ojulari, Jermaine Johnson, who contributed to that pass rush last season, they're not coming back for Georgia this year. I think that Nolan Smith welcomes that attention. I think he probably welcomes the pressure that comes with being a junior as a former five-star recruit, but certainly he has a lot of spotlight on him for this upcoming season, does he not?
Yeah, I think from a sacks pass rushing perspective, I actually think with what Nolan figures to do with more playing time and with what Adam Anderson brings back, coming back, I think the sack production that Azeez and Jermaine leave, you'll be able to replace. But it's what Azeez did in the run game. He was just such a sound defender. So with Jeff sort of taking that one off the board, and we'll leave a certain mustachioed quarterback for somebody else here to pick.
Can I call timeout just for a second? And I want you to make the point you're making, but I don't want to move off Nolan just yet because you're talking about Nolan Smith in terms of filling the very prodigious shoes of Azeez Ojulari. But as Jeff said, this is the highest rated recruit that Georgia's ever signed. Am I wrong for saying maybe a Nolan Smith as a junior could have a better year than Azeez Ojulari had at Georgia, and maybe because of that become more fondly remembered? I mean, we've seen, big time pass rushers break out on a single season basis before and really change the game for the team they played for. I almost wonder if the expectations for Nolan, I'm not saying that he would achieve this, but at least the threshold of possibility is even higher than what Azeez Ojulari did for Georgia last season.
Azeez was really, really good this year. And I think if Nolan had that capability to maybe make that leap that Azeez did, maybe we'd have seen it a little bit more by now. He would have found a way to get on the field more so than, say, an Adam Anderson if he was a better pure pass rusher or a Jermaine Johnson as well there. So while I certainly think Nolan can be a very good player, Azeez was just a really, really good football player. There's a reason he's going to end up going, I think, in the late half of the first round, possibly early second round, just because of how well he played. And reality is he led Georgia in sacks the past 2 seasons. And that's a very impressive accomplishment and not something that's going to be easily replaced.
Who was the other name you wanted to mention?
I was going to throw out Keely Ringo. I wrote about him earlier this week. I don't know what role he plays in Georgia's secondary this year. You can certainly play him at star. I think you could definitely see him in either one of the cornerback spots, but just given what Georgia has already lost there and the turnover you've seen back there, you need a guy like Keely Ringo, maybe not to be a Thorpe Award winner or an All-American, but you need him to go out there and be a solid cornerback for you, just given with what Georgia's going to see in that first week of the season against Clemson. They're going to have really good studs out there at wide receiver. E.J. Williams. We'll hopefully see Justin Ross back out there, Frank Laston, Joe Nada. And then if you get into the playoff, you're going to see really good receivers wherever you are. So you need a cornerback out there that can hang out there and play that well out there. And so I think Keely Ringo needs to have a very solid season for Georgia in its secondary in 2021.
Mike, before you bring in a name to this discussion, would you mind joining the Keely Ringo talk here? Because I think that Connor's right, both in terms of the possibility. I'm no scout, but you go back and watch Keely Ringo as a high school senior there in Arizona. This is a pretty special athlete, the kind of guy that's easy to imagine having really good success at UGA. But on the other side of that, we have certainly been shown over the years that for the most part, experience matters in the secondary. Not to say there aren't outliers. Obviously, Derek Stingley had an incredible freshman season for LSU a couple of years ago. But for the most part, secondary is a spot where experience does matter. And so therefore, you have the possibility of the athleticism for Ringo making him a huge part of this Georgia secondary. But you also have the possibility that whether it's injury recovery or just inexperience, that green level of prospect, someone who hasn't really been on the field too much, that could be a little bit of a problem there as well. I think that Ringo, in other words, Mike, is one of the real swing players on the Georgia roster. If he's as good as he looked in high school, that's big time for Georgia. If he's a freshman or redshirt freshman defensive back who hasn't played before, and he kind of looks more like that kind of guy, then obviously we could see the Georgia secondary appear a bit vulnerable, I would say.
I agree. No, I'm just kidding. I think Keely Ringo's got to find a place to start back there. I mean, he's a 5-star, whether it's as a star, does he grow into a safety, or is he a corner? And, you know, I'm kind of torn on the early – I mean, Eli Ricks this year was actually better than Stingley, believe it or not.
Stingley did not. You're right, Mike. Stingley did not have a good year this year. You're right about that.
Surprisingly. So, you know, how do you explain that, right? And, you know, but yet we go back to Tyson Campbell's freshman year, and he really wasn't that good. I mean, he wasn't that great. I mean, Eric Stokes actually beat him out if we go back and turn back the clock to that Missouri game when Stokes outplayed him. So I agree with you that Keely Ringo needs to play a major role in the secondary. I want you to repeat the question, though. Which 5-star has to do what?
Well, you can take it how you want to. Who's going to thrive this season? Who's going to have a big spotlight on him this season? You know, just when we talk about pivotal 5-stars in this Georgia roster, the name that comes to mind, I have a feeling I know who you're going to say. So I'll let you have the floor to say whatever you like.
I don't like being predictable. I mean, obviously, you know, the JT Daniels, the quarterback, has to stay healthy and has to play well. I mean, that's just obvious, but I think he is who he is, right? You know, when I think of like who's got to step up, who do you need to see more of, who needs to come to fruition? And you did say former 5-star, so I'm going to go with Kendall Milton, who actually lost his 5th star, as Jeff explained to me. But at one point, Kendall Milton was a 5-star. Georgia needs the next great running back. They need, you know, Chubb, Michelle, Swift, and then okay, they didn't have it. Milton got hurt. He had the hamstring in the preseason, and then he suffered the sprained MCL late in the year. But there were flashes of Kendall Milton playing at an all SEC level. You know, you go back and look at the rest. There's nobody in all SEC. There's nobody you would rank in the Georgia backfield from last year in the top 5 or 6 of SEC rushers. You can just go back and look. They're not on the radar. It was not RBU. Now, all the guys averaged more than 5 yards per carry, but there was no greatness, right? There was no, great run. You know, DeAndre Swift, boy, you turn the highlights on and we're all going, wow. You know, that run against Kentucky when 4 or 5 guys, you know, these runs, guys are out of position. Somebody runs, nobody touches them. Kendall Milton, though, tackle breaker. That run he had against Tennessee, it was only 12 yards, but it was one of the most impressive runs. I counted it, 9 guys. It took 9 guys to bring down Kendall Milton on a 12-yard run. And when he played against Auburn, he had contact. It might have been Big Cat. 285-pound guy hits Kendall Milton at the line of scrimmage, and that guy just falls down like Milton's Superman and wearing Kevlar or something. And I said, man, this guy's different. If Kendall Milton can be who I think he can be and be an all-SEC running back, I think he would make Georgia very special.
Jeff, jump on in here.
Yeah, so a couple things. I think we're having a fun little mini game right here. I think Trayvon Walker, Adam Anderson would also be acceptable. The name I also almost went with is, it's not a JT question. It's a George Pickens question. I'm not saying he needs to be Devonta Smith, but I'm saying he needs to be perhaps half of what Devonta Smith. For Georgia to really go in 2021, you need like a monster 70-catch, 1,400-yard season for George Pickens. I think that's a guy that could cover up a lot of issues. And folks, I got to at least be a little bit responsible here while we're talking about Keely. I just want to say a short word. I don't know if you guys saw, it was on Twitter. Traylee Hale, his mother, who's fought so well as a cancer survivor, cancer fighter, she shared word today on her Twitter account that she needs to go back into 5 more months of chemotherapy. I'm not going to turn this into Sunday school here, but I do believe in the power of prayer, which I believe a lot of people do that watch us on Dog Nation. So if you want to say a word for Keely Ringo's mom, Traylee Hale, as she goes through another 5-month fight with chemotherapy, another session of chemotherapy, I know that would be certainly appreciated by the family.
Yeah, no doubt. Miss Hale has really quickly become one of the most popular parental figures around the Georgia program. Obviously, a huge supporter of Georgia, even through the year with, Keely not playing, and obviously her going through a big, health concern. And so to hear that she's having to go back through that again, obviously our hearts go out to her. We will be praying for her, no doubt about that. And I hope that Keely and his family, Miss Hale in particular, I hope you feel those prayers because I no doubt know that all of Dog Nation just really is rallying behind you. And if there's ever a tough fighter out there that's going to fight this as well as it can be fought, obviously Keely Ringo's mom, Traylee Hale, certainly going to be an example of that. So Jeff, thanks for bringing that up. And, I also think from the football standpoint, you bring up some other interesting names there too. We reference Walker and guys like Adam Anderson as well. But let me say this about George Pickens. And I want to bring up another name that has not been talked about yet. I think that this is a very interesting year coming up for Pickens in 2021 because, and everybody knows I'm the biggest George Pickens fan in the world. I just think he's just wildly entertaining. Like everything he does is just so much fun. I've just enjoyed his 2 years at Georgia immensely, even if maybe at times this year didn't get the ball as much as we would like for him to. I still haven't just enjoyed him. But 2021 is the year where he goes from being, or has the potential anyway, to go from being the spectacular player who really showed up in some exciting bursts to being someone who kind of joins the Terrence Edwards and the AJ Greens and the names you want to mention as guys who, really put careers together, more than just big time games, wow highlights, because his highlight reel right now would go alongside anybody's. He's just kind of a spectacular player. But you put the right set of numbers up this season. You play big in the right collection of games, something that George has a little bit of a penchant for doing. You do that, and all of a sudden you put your career up there with a very short list of great Georgia wide receivers. From a legacy standpoint, Jeff, I think you're exactly right to mention Pickens. Mike, this is just a crucial year for Pickens in regards to how he could be remembered among the great Georgia receivers.
Yeah, well, now he's got a quarterback that can get him the ball and he knows the plays. And now Jeff would argue he needs to learn them better, and Jeff's right. He does need to grow. He does need to mature. But I think that's going to happen. I think part of the magic of JT Daniels, I look at JT Daniels and JT himself, there's nothing spectacular about him. He doesn't have prolific size. His arm strength is, I think it's good. I think if the greatness of JT is he throws every kind of ball. He can throw it at all 3 levels. I think people still need to learn what a back shoulder fade is. He underthrows everybody. No, it's called a back shoulder fade. You throw that when the other team's playing man-to-man coverage and their back is to the receiver, so the receiver can judge the ball. He can catch it or draw pass interference. But when he's not, so far he's not super duper mobile. He's mobile enough. He's great with the pre-snap read. He's a lot like Jake Fromm. Loved what Jake Fromm said. I get out of trouble before I get into trouble with the pre-snap read. I think JT is very much like that. But I think the real magic of JT Daniels is the effect that he has on the locker room and the receivers. They like working with him. There's going to be a very healthy offseason of growth between JT Daniels and George Pickens and Jermaine Burton, Kenny, McIntosh, the people that are going to work with him. And that's where you win championships. When we think about the Joe Burrow LSU team, and I'm not ready to say this team's going to, mimic the 2019 LSU team. I don't know if we're going to see that again for quite some time. Yeah. Joe Burrow was magical.
Mike won't be ready to say that until at least May.
No, I know, because I don't think Kirby's going to call 60-40 run or 60-40 pass. I really don't. I think Kirby, even if you look at Alabama's numbers this year, they really didn't throw it more than, I think they were pretty much 51-49 pass run. It really wasn't like Florida, which was 68-69% pass. I mean, you look at Mac Jones' numbers and you go, oh my God, they must have thrown. No, they really didn't throw it that much more. And I'm not convinced that Kirby's going to give JT Daniels, the volume or be that pass first team like LSU actually was. LSU went pass first. I don't think Georgia's going to go there. I think they might throw slightly more, but you're not going to see the kind of numbers from JT that he needs to win the Heisman Trophy. You're just not going to see that volume. But I do think you're going to see a very efficient and effective game. And I do think that Pickens realizes that this is his contract year.
So there's a name I want to bring into this discussion, and I promise I'm going to get there eventually. But I do want to kind of just tag on to what Mike just said there and kind of this past season. And, it's hard for me to imagine ever wanting an offense for Georgia more than I wanted the 2019 LSU offense for Georgia. But I believe I probably liked the Alabama offense probably better when it was all said and done. When you talk about, run-pass ratios, things like that, the devastating thing of Sarkeesian, and as a Falcons fan, it drives me crazy that he didn't do this when he was in the NFL. But he had such an NFL-style philosophy, I would say, of when they threw early in games and they threw on early downs. That really the preponderance of running plays for Alabama, you go back and look at some of their game logs, they're spending the fourth quarter just running because they're just, beating teams to death. And that's what winning teams have a tendency to do at the highest level is run late in games. But early downs, early in the game, they are just absolutely eviscerating people. And, you talk about the overall percentage of run pass plays for Georgia this upcoming season. What I'd really like to see is you really hammer folks when it really matters, when you really have a chance to assert yourself with aggressive play calling early in games.
Yeah, I think for me, what gives Alabama the edge over the 2019 LSU team, if we're going to get into that discussion, is that, yes, Alabama could throw the ball, I think, as well as LSU could. They just didn't have to do it as often. And then late in games, when they needed to, they were able to salt it away with their running game. You think back to that Georgia game, they scored 41 points, but they probably should have scored even more, but they went on a 6-minute drive to run out the clock that night and end the game on 41 points. That's something that they could do because they had a guy like Najee Harris. They had the Outland Trophy winner in Alex Leatherwood. They had the Remington Award winner in Landon Dickerson for most of the season there. So it's the ability, as you lay out there, to be able to throw when you can, whenever you want to, but also run when you absolutely need to salt away a game.
All right, before we wrap up this topic on the 5 stars, I'm going to ask you guys, anybody who wants to can take this. I could have very easily mentioned any of the names that you just mentioned, but I think there's another name here, or at the very least another position group that's got to be mentioned from the 5-star variety that hasn't been mentioned yet. Connor, you want to take a guess as to what I'm thinking?
You're going to say the offensive line.
I am. And I really don't know where Broderick Jones is with his development right now, and I apologize for not really remembering if Tate Ratledge was a composite 5-star at the end of the cycle or not. I don't quite remember that. Just missed. Okay. But if you told me as a fan, I could wave a magic wand right now and make one of those guys ready to be Georgia's left tackle and keep Jamari Salyer at left guard and, let the center position play out how it's going to. Let right guard play out how it's going to, because I'm honestly, Cedric Von Pron's going to be really hard to keep him off the field, for a full season this upcoming year. But let that play out how it's going to. Mike, you guys made, McClendon a All-American, freshman All-American. So you're fine at right tackle. But if one of those rising 5 stars could really emerge as a left tackle, boy, that changes everything for the Georgia offense and really for a bowl performance where you had some problems with the offensive line. Some of that may have come from left tackle there that day. It just changes everything if you can find that left tackle. And if it's one of those 5-star guys really stepping up, boy, that'd be a huge boost for UGA, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with you, BA, because one of the biggest concerns Georgia should have is keeping JT Daniels healthy. I mean, that guy took an absolute beating against Cincinnati. And you go back to the Missouri game, and he took some shots. And you go back to Mississippi State, and he took some shots. I mean, that offensive line, that pass protection was not good, one. And two, JT had a tendency to hold the ball. And, you can't do that in the SEC. You just cannot do that. I know that one of the big focuses for JT in the offseason is going to be improving his mobility, but he also needs to improve that internal clock. And he needs to be willing to audible more and go and check down to the hot receiver. His logic was, I can hang in the pocket and make that throw downfield. I can wait this out. It's just not worth the trade-off, because if JT Daniels goes down, the championship hopes go out the window. So I think you're right on as far as finding a left tackle, particularly Broderick Jones. Broderick has his own risk factors. I mean, you look on his Instagram and he likes things with wheels that go fast. And that's kind of scary in light of what happened with Richard LeCounte last season. You hope that is a cautionary tale for Georgia players in season to avoid motorized vehicles that don't have airbags. But, kids are kids, and, they want to live, only live once, right? So that's my biggest concern with Broderick Jones. Isn't on the field, it's off the field, and then I do think there's a number of 5 stars that Matt Luke has to choose from. That's an area that should be good if everybody does their job, right? If the culture is right, if the leadership right, if the coaching's right. Georgia is as well stocked. And Jeff, I guess am I right here? I mean, I got to think that Georgia's offensive line recruiting has been as good as anyone's in the country the last 3 or 4 years. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, I mean, especially through the transition from Matt Luke from Sam Pittman. Like, I'm putting together my mock classes right now and the boards, and I've been doing that for most of January and half of December. I really don't know if Georgia has a significant need on the offensive line for the 2022 class. I mean, you think about tackles and you stacked up Broderick, Amarius, Tate Ratledge at tackle, much less Warren McClendon's there as a freshman All-American. And now you look at guard, you still got Jamari, but Jamari was not going to be around Georgia for more than one more season. But you've got Chad Lindbergh, you've got Tate Ratledge, who very likely will be a guard. You've got Clay Webb, who's still that 5-star lurking in the shadows there a little bit. You've got Cedric Von Prawn, could he be a center? You saw what Georgia did with Dylan Fairchild this year. I think Micah Morris this year could be a swing guard as well. They just keep stacking them up over the last couple of years where really you just if I'm the 5-star offensive tackle this year, and I think I've got my big boy britches on and I can play wherever I want to in the country, I still don't know if I can play at Georgia with what Georgia has stacked up from the past two cycles at offensive line. It's just no longer a very glaring need. I'm sure Georgia's going to get 2 or 3 guys they like this year, but I don't think they're going to get 2 or 3 guys that are going to push anybody they've signed in the last 2 years. I got one quick one.
Well, hold on. Let me just before you move on, though, I'll let you make your point, but I do want to add to this that, not to get too deep in the weeds, but if you expand it out, instead of just 5 stars, right? Because we typically think of 30, 32 guys getting that 5-star nod. But if you start talking about like top 50 recruits, there are, as Connor said, Tate Ratledge just misses composite 5-star status. Cedric Von Prawn's like a top 50 recruit in the country, right? It's like if you really expand it out to say top 50, which puts you rarefied air in college football, you're adding a few more names from an offensive line in a group like that. So that really echoes the point that Mike made, which is that even with all that Georgia's lost from the offensive line the last couple of years, the credentials of the guys who are in that group still pretty sterling.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Xavier Truss. That's no disservice to him, but that's a 6'7" Army All-American or Adidas All-American game All-American there that I think he actually started the Peach Bowl for Georgia. And you keep, he started some games this year, so you keep going up and down the list. And I mean, there's a lot of guys that Georgia has at the offensive line spot. I guess the thing that I guess it kind of percolated in my head as we listened to everybody's very thoughtful answers. If you can make any former 5-star on the roster right now an All-American, give me the All-American that helps Georgia's bottom line wins and losses record the most. You don't want to say Daniels because that'd be cheating. If you said Pickens, then that means Daniels is going to have a great year. So you probably don't want to do that.
I think you're right, Jeff. Both those names are too easy for a question like this. I think you're right. It'd be awesome, but those names are just too easy to give. You have one?
I mean, I think you've got to turn a weakness into a strength there. So if you can wave a magic wand over somebody, I wouldn't give it to Nolan. I wouldn't give it to Adam Anderson. I wouldn't give it to Trayvon Walker. I'd probably give it to a Keely Ringo back there, because if you can tell me you're going to get All-American cornerback play out of the box as a redshirt freshman out of a guy like Ringo, certainly I think that would alleviate one of the bigger concerns on the Georgia football team.
I'm going to push back on you, because if you're going to tell me that JT Daniels is too easy of a name to give, I'm going to say, guy who's never played before, a little too much of a stretch maybe to say that he plays at an All-American level. That's why I think this question has a very clear answer. It's Nolan Smith. If Nolan Smith played at a David Pollock level, for Georgia in 2021, this is absolutely a team on the very shortest of short lists for a national championship. And if we're going to exclude quarterback wide receiver combo on this, there's no other player that could change the fortunes of the program as much as he could. With all due respect to why am I blanking on the other outside linebacker?
Adam
You're saying Anderson, but here's what I do.
Hold on, but let me finish this. With all due respect to Adam Anderson, who I love, even though I couldn't think of his name for 2 seconds. With all due respect to him, Nolan Smith's a better every down player right now than Adam Anderson is. And it's for that reason why I think it's not a huge stretch to say that. And, someone who I could think could just change Georgia's fortunes dramatically.
It's all love here, but I need to know the rules of the road with Brandon and having the sticks here, because he interrupts my thought, and then I come back with
my thought. Yeah,
and I can't jump back in there. I think there's common courtesy there somewhere in there, Brandon.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Mike, who's your answer? Sorry, Jeff.
Well, here's what I'll say.
You know what? Hold on, let me go. My answer is, you say turn a weakness into a strength. It's Quay Walker, because I think he was horrible last year. He was out of alignment. He was the guy that was lined up wrong on the 79 or whatever, the 89, 79-yard run on the beach. He's a day late and a dollar short, big drop off from there's no reason. The guy's 6'4", 250, and it's just like, make a tackle in the open field. Like, he's the guy that falls on the pile. But I saw nothing from Quay Walker that suggested that he's the playmaker. And listen, Monty was a blue-collar guy that was going to get you lined up, that was going to stop the run, that was going to be more than adequate and be that tough Mike linebacker when they went, 9 games without allowing a rushing touchdown. That was a lot of Monty Rice, right alignment, right assignment, being the guy that makes the stop. But I haven't seen greatness at the linebacker position. Now, I'm going to forecast that Nakobe Dean is going to be that guy, even coming off the torn labrum. But the other inside linebacker position is below mediocre. It's under par for me. That to me is a big concern. And I know we've talked about the secondary. I think Ringo's legit. Everything I've heard is legit. I'm optimistic about Kimber. I think they're going to get somebody good out of the transfer portal to play one of those quarter spots. Christopher Smith is adequate, not great. Lewis Cine has the potential for greatness. But that Mike linebacker, if you can give me a Mike linebacker that's an All-American, right? A Roquan Smith All-American, your throwback to Al Will. Give me that man-eating middle linebacker that makes interceptions, that forces. When's the last time you saw a Georgia linebacker with a pick six make a play, or just be some fearsome guy? And I don't count Aziz. He was really more of a defensive end than a 3-4. I mean, a Mike linebacker that just scared that guy across the ball. It's been a while. So that's where my magic wand goes.
Jeff, what did you want to say a minute ago? Can you? I know you didn't get a chance to finish the point you wanted to finish.
Well, I guess Mike, what I would say Roquan. That's as far as you have to go back there. That would be the 2017 season. I know if that's too far, but you got me thinking, Brandon, about a piece that makes the other people better. And I guess my mind instantly went to Trayvon Walker, because if Trayvon Walker plays like a All-American interior defensive lineman, he's going to catch doubles, which would make Adam Anderson, and it would make Nolan Smith's job coming on the edge so much easier. If you turn Trayvon into an All-American, then all of a sudden the attention that comes his way is going to make it a lot easier for Adam Anderson or Nolan Smith to play like an Azeez Ojulari did.
All right, we've had a lot of fun on this topic. Let's move on here. Cover 4 Live, presented by the good folks here at DogNation.com. Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, Mike Griffith, myself, Brandon Adams. I want to move on and talk about this because, Jeff, when you joined us on Dog Nation Daily this past Friday, you talked about the presence of Will Muschamp in Athens recently, former South Carolina head coach, obviously. Son Jackson, a walk-on on the Georgia team. Muschamp, obviously a good friend of Kirby Smart's. You had said on the show that he'd been spotted around Athens a little bit. our buddy Chip Towers from the AJC reported yesterday that Muschamp had actually been hired by Georgia in that kind of off-field quality control analyst role. Kirby Smart, the Georgia coach, aggressively pushed back on that, saying that Muschamp had been, I think he said twice, to the Georgia campus, but that he was not working at Georgia. I have my own theory about what I think is going on here. I talked about that a little bit on my show, Dog Nation Daily today. But Mike, what do you think? What's going on with Will Muschamp in Georgia right now?
What's the depth? Do you have to be paid to be considered a worker? Do I think that he's been involved with Georgia?
Yes.
Do you technically?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to give
then I don't
paycheck.
think. Okay. Well, I don't think he's. When you got a $15.5 million buyout, I don't think he's real worried about getting the first check. And certainly, there are certain stipulations that would endanger that buyout that Will Muschamp in Georgia are going to be very careful about. So when you say he's working for Georgia, you can't say that lightly, because the attorneys come rushing to the forefront and go, wait a minute, there's restrictions on his buyout and whatnot. Do I think he's contributing at Georgia? Absolutely. He's Kirby Smart's buddy, right? They're big buddies. And his son is on the football team. So, of course, I think he's observing, making notes, having conversations. Is he technically employed? Obviously not. University of Georgia issued a release. Kirby Smart, as you said, pushed back. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. Doesn't mean that it is either. But I do think he's a contributor. I think it's probably a bit of a state of flux right now.
Can I just say this, Connor? I love Kirby. I think he's great for Georgia. But if it really is going to threaten Will Muschamp's buyout to have him be seen as an analyst, that maybe they should be a little more careful to keep it a secret, because, Jeff mentioned on Dog Nation Daily Friday. Chip wrote about it yesterday. The message board sites have talked about this as well. Everybody's seen him in Athens. So maybe if somehow this put Muschamp's buyout in jeopardy, or at least from a legal standpoint, called it into question, that maybe they should, I don't know, keep it more under wraps or something.
Not much in Athens stays a secret for long, especially when you have a former SEC head coach and a good friend and a recognizable face of Kirby Smart with Will Muschamp there. It's not a surprise. It was the worst kept secret sort of around the Georgia program these last couple of weeks. I think Mike hit the nail on the head there. He is, I believe, let's say, volunteering his time in services to Kirby Smart right now. And I am sure once they get the legal mumbo and jumbo, he can actually start working and collecting maybe some sort of paycheck or whatever. I'm sure it'll be like 3 cents, given the millions of dollars that South Carolina is going to pay him. But
in all seriousness, Butch Jones made about $30,000, right? I'm like, well, we're talking about a very small amount of money, probably, right?
Well, $30,000 might not be small to some people, but
I'm saying in comparison to their previous salaries.
You look at what, Butch Jones is an example. You look at Alabama, they've taken former head coaches in and turned them into analysts and then ultimately helped them on their way. Steve Sarkeesian was at one point an Alabama analyst there, and now he's the head coach in Texas. Butch Jones at Arkansas State. So, this is the thing as Kirby gets more established and becomes a better head coach and shows that, hey, I can help rehabilitate your image or put you in a place where you can advance back up and move into big time quality jobs. Charlton Warren, for example, taking the Indiana defensive coordinator job, which I think might actually be a pretty good job with the way Tom Allen is trending up in the coaching business. It's just another rung on the ladder that Kirby is sort of climbing and checking off as I think he becomes a better and better head coach.
No, I think you're right about that, Connor. Jeff, how valuable do you think, if we are to presume for a moment that Muschamp will be around the Georgia program, and this is just for the sake of conversation because we should be fair and say that Kirby says as of now it's not happening, but if it is eventually going to happen, how valuable do you think that presence of Muschamp might be?
Well, first of all, how close are we, Brandon, to you having real estate agents in Oconee County and Watkinsville on your show? I could see our Bulldog Mike. I could see our Bulldog Mike Griffith getting there, looking through the MLS listings and property transactions to see what's going on there. But I tell you, if I have one more person that says, "Oh, I'm in the McGill Society and this thing's happening, it's Watkinsville, it's Oconee County," if I have one more person tell me that, I want to say, listen, Kirby considers Muschamp a peer, plain and simple. He in his cradle of coaching, Will Muschamp was there. They spent some time together on a couple of staffs. They know what's going on. They're good friends. I would say that having his son as a walk-on, man, would that have been an ultimate move there for Kirby Smart to walk on Jackson Muschamp as a safety valve for Will Muschamp and the staff if some things didn't ever work out? I think the thing that I want to think about is, I think Will Muschamp's a coach. I don't think he's an analyst. I think he likes being in the furnace. I think he likes being in the fire. I can't see him with his stately accountant glasses, maybe looking over game film and saying, let's attack that spot. Let's stay away from there. Let's do this. I think Will Muschamp still has a lot more to offer. Maybe the contract verbiage that might stunt whether he's on the field in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. But the thing you got to say is, who in the Georgia staff has as much coaching stripes and as much street cred as Kirby Smart? Will Muschamp's probably in that conversation. Now, you can argue successes. You can argue the Alabama resume versus the Texas and Auburn and South Carolina and Florida resume, sure. But Will Muschamp's coached a lot of football and stopped a lot of offenses. So he certainly brings a lot to the table. Not even just, the recruiting aspects, but making players better. I think his resume shows he's coached linebackers and he's coached the secondary in his career. He was a former walk-on safety at Georgia. Whatever capacity Will Muschamp joins Georgia, he makes Georgia a lot better.
So I can't tell if you're hinting at this or just accidentally. Are you suggesting you think that Will Muschamp could be a candidate for the defensive backs coaching job? Because I don't believe that'd be true.
Yeah. For me, Will Muschamp has never came across to me as a guy that's a suggester or hey, let's try this. The analyst role where a guy's just sitting there making those suggestions. I think he's a guy that works well with players. He works well on game day. He's a motivator. He gets players better. And I mean, maybe a Monday through Thursday in Athens is what he needs for a year off before he jumps back in it.
But yeah, that's the thing, Jeff. I mean, wouldn't you agree that if you look at the recent track record, with all due respect to Matt Luke, you become a position coach, you're not getting back into head coaching interviews for a long, long time. But history shows it's a lot easier to get a big job from kind of the analyst role, Butch Jones, perfect example of that, than it is to kind of get that job. Once you put yourself kind of back down that position coach wrong, that's the sort of what do you call it, like job category that you're in. If you want to stay up there for the head coaching interviews anywhere across college football, then you've got to, you can't settle for less than that, because then that's the way the industry starts to view you, fairly or not.
Yeah, but I think with Muschamp, I think his resume and career arc has kind of been altered here. He's had the big job where stakes were too high, level was too high, expectations were too high. That was Florida. And now he's had the medium tier and a big conference job, and that didn't work out either. I don't know what's left for Will that would be more enviable than perhaps what he's got as an SEC coordinator, as an SEC position coach.
Mike, let me bring you in on this too, just very quickly, because one of the things I do think is interesting, and maybe you can remember better than me, whether it was this year or last year, but Smart, when talking about Muschamp, actually said something kind of interesting, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, that because Muschamp had kind of traveled a little bit different coaching path, he was out of Texas for a while, became a head coach earlier than Kirby Smart did, that we think of these guys as good friends, former Saban disciples, but defensively, from a schematic standpoint, they are not carbon copies of each other. Now, listen, I'm not going to pretend to know the differences in Muschamp's preferred scheme in comparison to Kirby's. That's not the shtick I'm trying to run with here. But Smart has said himself that from a philosophical standpoint, Muschamp does have some different favored tendencies. So maybe if he is going to be an analyst at Georgia eventually, Smart says he's not right now, but if he does become one eventually, maybe he also has the value of bringing some new ideas to the table, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one, because I think that's what Dan Lanning's there for. And, I don't know how many chefs you want making the soup, but I actually thought that maybe Kirby might have, gotten up to it in his arms a little bit, maybe last season, being around the program more. I think in Dan Lanning, you've got a guy with plenty of ideas, and Glenn Schumann. And that's why I think the analyst role and being around his son and trying to relax a little bit. I know it's hard to imagine Will Muschamp, trying to relax a little bit, as Jeff said, wearing the stately glasses and looking at the sheet. But, it might not be the worst thing for his life, to kind of remove himself a little bit. The other thing is working with Kirby Smart. Friends or not, I don't know, how those discussions go, but those are two type A personalities. I mean, I feel like somebody's head would explode if you put them in the same room too many days in a row. I mean, that's, especially if there was, consternation, especially if there was a loss, right? I mean, when you're winning, everything's good. But when things start to go south, I don't think, and Kirby's a very vocal and involved guy. I can't see Will Muschamp taking orders from Kirby Smart. I just can't. I see that would be, like you said, more of a peer relationship, maybe like Mel Tucker. But to your point, Brandon, I just think, because of the payout from South Carolina, because of the fact that you want him to recruit, and because of what Georgia needs. Georgia needs a player's coach. There's been a lot of guys that have left that secondary. There's no easy way
to be
to
clear,
say it.
I'm not suggesting that Muschamp should be defensive coordinator. I'm just saying, hey, I saw this cool thing on film. What if we tried this instead? That's all I'm saying. I mean, you give me my choice of Lanning or Muschamp, I want Lanning as well. So let's make sure that I'm clear about that. I just mean, as an extra pair of eyes, extra pair of hands in a film session, that some institutional knowledge like Muschamp brings to the table. I'm a big believer in the role of analyst. I think part of Alabama's success has been built on the analytic work that's been done by their quality control guys. I think as many sharp coaches, Buster Faulkner, Will Muschamp, whomever else, I think that's a pretty big weapon for the resourced programs to be able to employ. Jeff
is just taking over the show here. The commenters are going crazy. Tell took off his shirt. And, just really, Jeff, can you talk about, was it getting a little warm, or was this part of the production tonight? Is there another level of this coming ahead? I mean, what's going on down there?
Well, I know Brandon will always be a fan of whatever we can assimilate into our programs that look a lot like pro wrestling. He's always like, if someone comes in with a steel chair and busts it over somebody's head after a bad take, I'm sure he'd like that. But quite honestly, I let everybody in on a little secret last night on Hedges, is that my entire kitchen's getting remodeled. We're getting paints. So like, we really have no light in here. And I've got this huge shop light on me right now, giving me some light. Not as good as the light that Brandon's found inside his stately Adams Manor right now, but it's a little temperate right now, a little tropical. So I just said, we got a couple more topics. Brandon's got something to say, so I better just dig in here.
Well, Connor, before we move off this topic, give me your thumbnail sketch of, we mentioned briefly defensive backs coach. How do you think that coaching search is going right now? I mean, it's not going very far. It just became the job just became available, but you know what I'm saying. Talk about the defensive back coaching search.
Sure. Like I'm at SEC Media Days. I don't think this is going to be a quick hire, a quick turnaround. I know there's the Terrion Arnold concern out there. He is Georgia's last major recruiting target in the 2021 class. But you look back at when they hired Charlton Warren, Mel Tucker announced he was leaving the first week in December. Charlton Warren didn't get hired for another 6 weeks until the middle of January. And then, ultimately replacing the defensive coordinator role that Tucker held, that took even longer. Kirby's not going to rush into this. He's going to try and find the best possible candidate for this on sort of his own timeline here. So I don't expect this to be done by the time we finish recording the show or something along the lines of that. I think Kirby Smart is going to wait and let sort of things play out over the course of the next couple of weeks.
All right, I want to try to squeeze in two topics before we're done. I also want to take some comments as well. So let's roll on here. Cover 4 Live. Good to have all of you with us here tonight. And obviously now we kind of move into the pre-draft process of the football calendar, made weird this year because of the absence of a traditional NFL scouting combine. But a lot of former Georgia Bulldogs will have their chance to impress at the Senior Bowl, and other guys will have their chance to impress in their own right, in their own way. So if we kind of throw it out there for the guys who are on their way to the NFL, or at least going to try their hand at that, who do you think stands to impress during this pre-draft process? Jeff, I'll start with you. Who do you really look to see really perform well over the course of the next few weeks, Senior Bowl or wherever else?
I think when we were talking about this in our lengthy pre-show meetings, tongue in cheek there, I think Malik Herring's a guy that I think is going to have a better career in the NFL, perhaps than he was, maybe not as revered as he was at Georgia. You see all those Pro Football Focus guys share the fact that he has 88, 89, 90 grades throughout his career at Georgia. But you got to remember, people would like, where are the big plays? Well, a lot of his roles in that defense was just to set the edge and funnel everything back. I mean, he was a guy that just had to hold up in a lot of grim territory. He was always the guy that always seemed to me like the second guy on a pressure. Never really received the double team blocks. Maybe he blocked the pass every now and then. So to keep my point pretty clear and streamlined here, I think Malik Herring is a guy that I think has bigger upside than what he showed at Georgia in the pros. And I don't know, man, maybe they find a way to do something maybe unique with Ben Cleveland at the next level as well.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize it was Benny Cleveland, but I guess when you go to the NFL, you can pick up new nicknames. You start making a lot of money, call himself whatever he wants. If we're talking about former Georgia players, I think Jamie Newman could show a lot down at the Senior Bowl, a lot more than he showed at Georgia last year. But seriously, folks, I think Eric Stokes is going to blow it up at the Combine. I think Eric is going to run a low 4.3 number, move into the first round. I think he's going to be the mover, the shaker. You look at him, he didn't give up more than 90 yards in coverage in any game, 2 pick sixes. Thought he was very underappreciated this year. Probably, Kirby, for some reason, Kirby never talked as much about Stokes as he did Tyson Campbell, right? It was Tyson Campbell that started the year as the starter. And then Stokes came on at Missouri, had this incredible game, and what was really a closer game, if people remember that Drew Lock game. In fact, I want to say I think that was the first home game that Drew Lock didn't throw a touchdown pass in his career, something ridiculous like that. I am really, really high on Eric Stokes. Personally, I like this guy. I know Connor likes him too. He's been up there for those interviews. You just get such a positive vibe from this player. He talks so wonderfully about his teammates. He's so charismatic. He's got this story about being bullied when he was younger. He seems like a man of the people. He seems like the guy that's going to be the community figure guy. I can't say enough good things about Eric Stokes. If he was a stock, that'd be the guy I'd be buying into right now.
There's a lot to like about Stokes for sure. Connor, who would be your name?
It's going to be Richard LeCounte. He's a guy who obviously didn't play the last half of the season. He's going to have to answer some very serious questions from NFL talent evaluators. But when he was healthy prior to the end of the Kentucky game, I don't think there was a better defensive player in the SEC this year than Richard LeCounte over the course of those first 5-6 games of the season. So I think when he's down there in Mobile next week, he's going to get a chance to show that he can do a lot of things that really impress NFL teams. I do think
he's healthy enough right now to do that. You're not a doctor, of course, but you think he's healthy enough?
I only pretend to play one on Twitter. Admittedly, I don't know. I hope that he is. I hope for his sake that he is, because this is going to be a really significant opportunity for him to sort of show what he can do. And I have no doubt that he's going to go in there when he talks to teams, impressing those teams just based on what we've talked with him before at various media availabilities.
Yeah, I think it's a really good name there as well. And boy, I'd certainly be rooting for Richard as well as all the other names that kind of come up in that discussion there as well. Cover 4 Live here on the Dog Nation video channels tonight. I want to squeeze this in. Tennessee does hire Danny White, former UCF athletic director, as its new athletic director. White's a respected guy. All the blue checks just seem to love him. How much, Mike, do you think a guy that legitimately has presided over, a fairly large group of 5, level program, and a program that has had some athletic success, men's basketball, football, things like that. How much do you think, knowing the landscape the way that you do in Knoxville, that White helps calm things down there, if at all, right now?
Well, I mean, sure, you got to have a good. I don't think administration's been their problem the last 3 years. I think the hire was, all the resources are lined up in a row for football. I think the football coaching hire is what it comes down to. Greg Byrne, he's a great AD at Alabama. Yeah, well, he ain't the secret sauce, right? That would be Nick Saban. Greg McGarity, right? I know, BA, I mean, there's most people like Greg, but the hire Kirby Smart. So I don't get excited about athletic director hires. Now, in the case of Josh Brooks at Georgia, I did, because Josh is a guy that will continue the success that Georgia's had. And it's really hard to promote from within and find a dynamic figure like a Josh Brooks that can take over your program and actually advance it. This case is just, it's almost like, wow, they didn't screw that up, right?
But when you say the Tennessee athletic director situation has been uniquely awful, whether it be John Curry, the embarrassing coaching hire, process that before Jeremy Pruitt, I would say that, Philip Fulmer and, the attempt to extend Pruitt's contract before finally moving away from him. I mean, I'd say in the case of Tennessee that, for the most part, I don't think much about athletic directors. In the case of Tennessee, I would say the athletic director situation there has been uniquely terrible.
Yeah, I think that's an overstatement. Fulmer got the Georgia game moved. He made some other really good hires. He was able to marshal the support they needed, to get a lot of money back into facilities, hire a really good staff at a time when they needed somebody. I thought he hired the wrong guy in hindsight, But I wouldn't. I don't think that Philip Fulmer was uniquely
Wait, which
terrible.
Georgia game did he get moved?
On the schedule?
Well,
that he was a part of that.
You mean this year or the November thing?
Yeah, and no, this year was just, SEC league office draw out of a hat, theoretically, right? Although Florida and Alabama had back-to-back, or the only two teams that didn't play back-to-back road games. That's a whole nother conspiracy theory. But no, he was the dance partner that Auburn and Georgia needed for that game against Auburn to get moved out in November. It took another team to trade. That team was Tennessee. That worked in Tennessee's favor.
And why is that?
Florida, because they were playing Florida and Georgia back-to-back. And they didn't want to do that. That was bad for Tennessee, having to play those two games in a 2 or 3 week span. They needed one of those games moved back. So they were glad to get Georgia moved back to November to split those games up. That was an amen corner for Tennessee.
I forgot what the question is. Connor, on the situation with Tennessee.
Mike's logic there has his brain and a pretzel.
It's not for everyone.
I like this hire here by Tennessee. Danny White is a respectable name. He's dealt with crazy fan bases before at UCF there. So I think obviously not to the intensity that Tennessee has, but I do think he's got some experience with this. He's done a good job with that men's basketball program, with the football program. I know they're not quite the same level they were under Scott Frost, but Josh Heupel's done a really good job sort of continuing things there. And my big complaint with Tennessee is they need adults in the room. And to me, Danny White fits that adult in the room sort of personality that they need there. And someone, you look back at Auburn and some of the reporting that was done on that coaching search, it sounds like Alan Green really stepped in and said, no, we're not hiring Kevin Steele as our full-time head coach. We're going to go out and try and get a respectable name in Brian Harsin. So I think, as much of a mess as the Tennessee football program still is in right now, and while, yes, I do praise the hiring of Danny White, everything that has led to this has been an abject disaster there. They still have a long way to go to get back to, respectable, much less feeling like 98 again.
Jeff, it certainly seems like that the consensus among a lot of people who are covering this story is that by hiring White, Tennessee will now make a football coaching hire as well, something that some people wondered if they would wait and let Kevin Steele have the interim tag for this year and then figure it out after that. But an aggressive hire for an athletic director that a lot of people know about him. He's a fairly well-known guy in college coaching circles, that he may also being looking to make a football hire as well, whether it's someone he has experience with in the past, like a Lance Leipold from Buffalo or whoever else. But this is a guy that might be now looking to pull the trigger on a new coaching hire there.
Funny, Brandon. I'm very much looking forward to transforming my mind. When you said the blue checks all love him, for the first half second you got that off out of your mouth, I was thinking politics. I like the blue states, the blue checks.
No.
I mean, honestly, when I first saw the story,
it's an easy question. It's an easy thing to get confused because the blue checks also love politics. But in this particular case, my thing has nothing to do with politics whatsoever.
You're talking about baby blue jays or blue chicks?
Blue checks. Blue checks.
Blue checks.
The very serious college football writers.
He means those with
Connor knows something about. He speaks Twitter.
He means the verified blue check. You know what you're talking about, Mike? The verified blue check.
Half the members on this panel are blue check people.
So I heard this story and I first went to Google and I'm like, okay, that's not the Danny White that used to play for the Cowboys.
It is not.
But you did learn this. You did learn that Danny White is connected to Peyton Manning. He is, friends somehow. They've got the same circles as Peyton Manning. So it looks like Peyton Manning is going to have his hands all over this hire. Personally, I don't know who they can hire. They can kind of salvage what's the number? 22 guys in the transfer portal right now.
It's a number.
I think even the host of Vol Nation Daily put himself in the transfer portal as well yesterday as well. But I mean, they got to do something, folks. I don't even know if hiring a Peyton Manning would even salvage what's going on at Tennessee right now. Losing all these players.
Losing all these players, Jeff. If you had all the money in the world and you're Tennessee, right? Saban's not going anywhere. Sweeney's not going anywhere. Urban Meyer. You could hire any different. Who would you get, even if you could offer? Like, who would be that guy?
That's a really good question.
I don't know who that would be. Lincoln Riley.
You got to play defense in the SEC.
Oklahoma.
Lincoln Riley. You can go play that flag.
You score enough points.
You can go play that flag football in the NFL.
Hey, I got Lane Kiffin. I got Lane Kiffin on the line here, Brandon. He wants to talk to you.
Here's what I'll never understand. And listen, it's too late in the show to get into my own conspiracy theory. But I'll never understand why like Lane Kiffin gets to be the darling and treated as a legitimate option to come back to Tennessee by a lot of people when he's the one that ruined all this to begin with. And you can draw an absolute through line from his hiring to the stuff they're still dealing with now. Why is Hugh Freeze persona non grata if everybody just falls all over themselves to love on Lane Kiffin? First of all, Freeze is the better coach. I don't think that's in dispute whatsoever. He's a less enjoyable personality. People don't like Freeze because they believe he's a hypocrite. But this notion that there's nothing wrong with potentially rehiring Lane Kiffin, which serious people have suggested. Now, it's not going to happen, but serious people have suggested it. The idea that that's just fine and well to kind of talk about an open conversation within the Overton window, if you will. But the notion that you can't even pretend to want to hire Hugh Freeze, I find that entire line of thinking baffling, to be completely
well.
Let me tell you how bad it was. They were going to. There was an honest to goodness motion made to rename the sewage plant on campus after Lane Kiffin when he left. That was 9 years ago. And you're right. It's like somebody hit Knoxville over the head and they got amnesia and forgot that he triggered a 3-year investigation. I'll tell you what else got forgotten in the shuffle. That's pretty amazing. Was that staff that he had and the number of violations that they committed had one coach that everybody in the SEC was so concerned with that they had to get permission to hire, good old Ed Orgeron. Everybody loves Ed Orgeron. At one point, he was one of the biggest outlaws among the assistant coaching ranks in college football. And everybody's gotten amnesia because that's how it works. Short attention spans, short memories. And Brandon, you nailed it. I have no earthly idea how Lane Kiffin went from being the villain that triggered a 3-year investigation that led to 5 years worth of downfall. I mean, the guys he recruited, he had people selling drugs out of the dorm. Another guy ended up being found guilty of murder. I mean, it was the worst of the worst in 1 year.
But Saban laid hands on him, man. He washed him clean, man. That's what happened.
Saban also left him in the Superdome locker room too, didn't he? Connor, you were about to say something a minute ago. What were you about to say?
I actually have a name I think Tennessee should absolutely go after.
All right, who's that?
James Franklin at Penn State.
It's not bad. That's not bad.
If I have
time for Franklin to leave.
I have more money, if I have Texas money, if I have more money than God, James Franklin is someone that I say make me say no, because I think he's got similar experience in Penn State is to what Tennessee is in the Big Ten. There, he's played a juggernaut every year in Ohio State, and then he's also played traditionally pretty decent teams in Michigan and Michigan State. And if he says no, then I'm calling up Tom Allen because I think he's someone who's built that program at Indiana from the ground up and done a really good job there. I know that he might not be the most popular hire just yet, but he's a guy that's really impressed me this past season.
Hey,
How about Sam Pittman? Sam
Pittman's not. First of all,
have a winning record.
I think Pittman's is a pretty good coach, but his job security is the fact that he's the lovable homestay guy at Arkansas. You go be a mercenary at Tennessee, all of a sudden now you're solely judging your win-loss record. And that's not waters everybody wants to swim in there, but it's certainly an interesting name to bring up. All right, let's roll through a couple comments here. We have taken care of our cover 4. Let's do cover more now and take your questions and comments. And really what I'm seeing a lot in the Facebook comment section, this always makes me concerned when people bring this up. People say that I look tired tonight. Do I really look that bad?
You've been working a long day at customer service with that headset, so that could be it.
That's exactly right. I feel like I'm like one of those Time Life Books operators back in the day to really take myself.
You've been doing day trading. That's what he's been doing, right? All day today.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So people are saying I look tired in the Facebook comment section. What else are people saying in the comment section? Let's do a couple before we get ready to wrap up here. James Crump says he thinks that Tennessee's going to have to go after a lesser coach. I think that's probably true at this point in time. I've said this pretty clearly. I would not have fired Jeremy Pruitt. I think it's a huge mistake to fire Pruitt. I think that they're worse off for having done so. But if you're going to do it and you're not going to hire Hugh Freeze, of the people that you can legitimately get, I just don't know who makes you better. I do legitimately think Tennessee is in a pretty bad situation here right now. Jody Dolan asks, any defensive backs from the Tennessee transfer portal that could help us? I don't know about defensive backs, Jeff, but there are some big vol names in that transfer portal right now. Henry Toto and Quavaris Crouch. A lot of names that people know, and Toto's already been very good for Tennessee in his career thus far.
I think he's probably number one if you had to look at the stock report on all the Tennessee guys. I think Eric Gray's a name that comes to a lot of folks' mind. But Crouch is different to me. Crouch was the guy that thought he was a running back, then he became a linebacker. You see a lot of, I think maybe another one of the better names for Tennessee that's portaling out and already found a home at Oklahoma is Juanie Morris as well.
Yeah.
Folks, I don't know. Maybe this might be worse. Maybe a death penalty might be worse. But when you're having a coach leave, all this coordinator action going left and right, and then you see 22 players portaling out on a team that did not finish 2020 on a high note whatsoever. Would you take Vanderbilt or Tennessee right now next year, considering the straits that both programs are in right now?
No, Vanderbilt's. I mean, look, Tennessee's a mess. Vanderbilt's even worse mess. The entire Volunteer State right now is a major ugly situation right now. I'm not too happy with either one of them. But by comparison, I mean, the program that's really kind of come out of the coaching carousel thing looking okay is actually Auburn, right? I mean, Harsin was a proven coach at Boise State. Both their coordinator hires look sharp. I think Mike Bobo takes a big risk by going there because, his name is mud now at the last two places that he worked. By his own doing or not, he's got detractors at both of his previous stops. If it doesn't work at Auburn, that's going to be a problem for him. And I say that as someone who really likes Bobo and believes him as a coach. I think he took a risk by going to Auburn. But the coaching hires they made really, really looks pretty good in comparison to the debacle at South Carolina and the absolute, tire fire at Tennessee.
With Bobo, if only there were an example of a former Georgia player who flamed out at two stops pretty spectacularly, potentially working his way back as an analyst and maybe one day as a position coach or coordinator at Georgia. But we just can't think of anything that would tie that. So, yeah, I guess Bobo's in a real tough bind.
I like that for sure. Guys, give me a final comment where I look for a final comment from the audience. Jeff, go ahead and give me a final comment here.
Interesting. You brought my mind to Auburn. They hire a linebackers coach today or yesterday. I believe it was from Memphis or Middle Tennessee State. Where does that leave their best recruiter on their previous staff, Travis Williams?
That's a great question.
Just recently turned 38. You want to talk about a guy that maybe Shane Beamer possibly needs to get in the business of keeping that guy in the SEC and those recruiting ties. I think that's somebody that what's happening there with Travis Williams. It seems like Brian Harsin has brought in all the guys with SEC experience to put together a great staff, except maybe one of the best pieces on the current Auburn staff in Travis Williams.
Yeah, that's a big name. Certainly a real thorn in Georgia's side from a recruiting standpoint. Georgia won a lot of those battles, but Williams was a big factor in a lot of those recruits. Mike, how about a final thought for you?
Yeah, I agree with Connor that Kirby's going to do this on Kirby time, but I've got to think that whoever, before, National Signing Day, the first Wednesday in February, I haven't looked at my calendar, but that's approaching. And I've got to think that if a player is going to sign their future away to Georgia, they're going to want to know who they're going to play for. Now, it's possible that signing day could come and go. We've seen that happen before. I think Kirby is intentionally deliberate. But this position hire, to me, this is a make or break hire. I think Georgia's championship hopes hang in the balance. They've got to get it right there, right? For all the talent they had, 8 of 11 starters back, they gave up 564 yards to Alabama. That's not acceptable. Something went wrong there, whether it was scheme, whether it was coaching, whether it was breakdowns. Something went wrong there. They were less effective than they should have been in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So my eyes are peeled on that. There were a Jay Valai, a guy that I thought could have been a candidate, former Texas DB coach, gets hired by Houston. I'm really searching. I don't think Corey Raymond from LSU. I don't know if him and Kirby are exactly. So who is out there? Derek Ansley. I reached out to him. Last time I reached out to him, there was an opening. There was conversation. This time I reached out, crickets. Don't think he has any interest. Probably going back to the West Coast, one shape or form. So to me, that
maybe he doesn't have interest in talking to you. Maybe he just want to talk to Kirby. He just don't want to talk to you.
Maybe you might be right. I should probably have him call you.
I'm playing. I'm kidding. By the way, somebody in the comment section also mentioned Alontae Taylor. That's a defensive back in Tennessee I do like. Honestly, don't even know what his status is. I don't know if he's playing at Tennessee next year. I really half these guys with all these weird eligibility rules now. I don't even know what anybody's doing. But Alontae Taylor is definitely a defensive back for Tennessee that I have liked. With that said, Connor, you want to give us a final word? You didn't get a chance to say anything final word wise.
I do. I'm actually give a shout out here to Tom Crean and the Georgia basketball team. They beat Kentucky last night. I've been fairly critical of Tom Crean in the past and with what they've done so far this season, but look, I have low expectations. You have to find a way to beat the worst Kentucky team of my lifetime. They did that last night. Credit to them. Kudos to them. 2-game winning streak in the SEC. Came on the show, Dog Nation Daily today. Got sucked in. That's a nice win. I'm not expecting NCAA tournaments, Final Fours, things like that, but just be consistently competitive. Win the games you should and be competitive in the games where that you are out-talented. So it's a nice step for Cream to have in his feather in his cap. So congrats to him and the Georgia basketball team.
Thought Crean was great on Dog Nation Daily today. And as you said, this is not a typical Kentucky team. But listen, they've got a lot of size. Sarr, the Wake Forest transfer, they got a lot of big men. It takes a real game plan to negate that. What they do with the block shots, what they do with even the changing of shots that don't get blocked, the offensive rebound, you got to have a game plan to negate that. And I thought last night, Crean really did a pretty good job of that, the players themselves. It was not a pretty shooting night for either team at times, but Georgia did enough to win that game. And I'm entertained by Georgia basketball right now. Obviously, a couple of their early SEC performances could have been better, but I find this team actually pretty fun to watch. And for me, I prefer to watch this team over the Ant-Man team from a year ago.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
And they really got robbed at LSU when you think about it. They could be 3-3 just as easily right now.
Boy, there were some awful calls in that game last night, too. And listen, I'm the last one to complain about officiating, but some of that stuff in your own gym was pretty reprehensible. So I'll stop whining about that, especially since Georgia won the game. We'll leave that there. Thanks to all of you for being here on Cover 4 Live tonight. Certainly appreciate that. Jeff will be with us on Dog Nation Day tomorrow. Connor and Mike both have some great content planned the upcoming weekend here at dognation.com. If you missed Mike's interview on Monday with Peter Burns, really good stuff from the SEC Network personality. I was entertained by that. We played some of that on the show this week, and I know we talked to Mike about that. Check that out back on the Dog Nation video channels if you missed that. I know Mike's got a couple of other really good interviews he's got about to pop up here as well. So he's going to be busy. I know all of you are busy as well. We'll let you get back to enjoying your Thursday night. But thanks for being here on Cover 4 Live, and we will look forward to speaking to you next week.